Mind Your Farm Business on RealAgriculture.com is brought to you by RBC Royal Bank.
Hello and welcome to another episode of the Mind Your Farm Business podcast brought to you by RBC Royal Bank. I'm your host, Sean Haney of RealAgriculture.com. And of course, you can find more episodes of this podcast by going to MindYourFarmBusiness.com. Today, we're going to dive into a topic that's transforming industries really around the world, including agriculture, and that's artificial intelligence, or better known as AI. It's a bit of a different form of AI than we're used to in agriculture. Joining us today is Doug Foley of Giant Goat. He's an expert in AI applications for business and agriculture. We're going to explore how AI has evolved over the decades and how it's now accessible to small and medium-sized businesses, helping them streamline processes and analyze data more effectively. So from livestock farming to crop production and everywhere in between, AI is making significant inroads, offering potential productivity gains and some new insights that are really applicable to our industry. So in this episode, Doug will share how AI can help businesses leapfrog some of the competition that is out there, the challenges of avoiding bias when it comes to some of the output of AI, and practical tips for getting started with AI tools like OpenAI's ChatGPT app. And we're also going to discuss AI's potential to revolutionize how companies operate by freeing up time for high-value tasks. We're getting more efficient as the business owner. So let's get started and explore the exciting possibilities of AI with Doug Foley. Doug, welcome to the Mind Your Farm Business podcast.
Sean, thanks so much for having me. Pleasure to be here.
Okay, today we're going to talk about AI. And we're not talking about artificial insemination. We are talking about artificial intelligence. What exactly is artificial intelligence?
You know, they're kind of not too far apart if you ask some of the conspiracy theorists with how far it can go. But for a layman's terms, AI is simply the combination of machine learning, meaning how data is processed, and large language models, which allow us to interpret inputs and give us a desired output. So for example, if I said, hey, can you help me write this email in this tone? It knows to output based on that specific thing. The advantage is it continues to learn both from your inputs and hundreds of thousands of others, and it will consistently improve its ability to produce an outcome. We see this a lot, for example, with the evolution of image processing. You know, it started off like terrible grainy images, looks like a Jackson Pollock. Now today, it's almost like realistic, real life things that they can produce. So it's simply learning based off of inputs and outputs and constantly getting better. It's been around for a long, long time. I'm not sure if you're a Jeopardy fan or not, but back in 2012, Watson appeared on Jeopardy and beat Ken Jennings. That was AI. So it's been around forever. So Gartner, they produce a study. It's called the Gartner Hype Cycle, where they plot the innovation trends of a lot of things. If you go look at Gartner Hype Cycle AI, you'll actually see how long it's been around, where we're at. And I think the thing is now is it's just accessible to the public via chat or Gemini or whichever your preference is. But it's been here for a long, long time. I mean, it's the basis for programmatic advertising, but it's just now at the forefront of everybody's tongue because we see it everywhere. It's finally reached mass adoption.
And if we think about artificial intelligence, we think about, the people that are listening to this and they're farmers and ranchers, they're involved in agriculture, they're running a farm business. Now that could be all shapes and sizes. Is it for them, or is this something that is more for the largest of corporations to figure out and use?
One of my favorite things, my passion for entrepreneurship, I think artificial intelligence used wisely is going to help that small to medium cap business catch up to some of these giants. I think the challenge right now is their understanding of how do I use it? How can I start incorporating it? And most people have a bias thing, it's only for social media, it's only for content. But true artificial intelligence can be used across a business. It can be used for processing data and accounting, or, even if you want to look at hey, where are my cost centers? How do I optimize this? It can run analysis really easy for you. It's actually what it's best at is analyzing data. It hasn't been until recently that can process language and images. The other pieces of it is just figuring out how to streamline process. And the really interesting thing from the marketing perspective that we've seen, so much of what people call AI is actually just fundamental automation. So we're automating tasks. But a lot of people are like, well, that's AI. Well, no, it's marketing automation. It's been here for 30 years. It's just people are starting to realize, hey, now's the time I should probably digitize my business. I should upgrade and include these things. Now you can integrate AI into it. But if you go back, if you remember, I don't know, it was like the late 2000s, maybe late 90s. Do you remember that little paperclip thing that used to show up in Microsoft Word? Clippy?
Yeah. Oh, annoying, that little guy.
Yeah, like so annoying. But that's kind of where we're at. So whether you use AI or not, it's going to be integrated in everything that we use very shortly. And it's already pretty close.
Almost like you're gonna be using it and accessing it and maybe not even know it. It's just a function.
100%. And that was one of the scary announcements that came out on Tuesday with Apple. They said, hey, we're integrating OpenAI into our Siri platform. So if you have an iPhone, very shortly you're going to be using AI without even realizing it. And it's permeated every type of business application you can. If you have Microsoft, you have it. If you use Google, it's Gemini, it's there. If you use anything, it's being integrated into the platforms. Scary or not, that's a political opinion, but those tools are going to level the playing field for smaller companies to compete with the giants that used to do the math or that used to do the work with just mass amounts of people.
And you talk about analyzing data. I think of a dairy farm, and the dairy farm installs a robot, okay, to do the milking. And I've talked to a lot of dairy farmers that have gone through this process where it may decrease the amount of labor needed, but it also changes what they do in the barn. So they go from, pulling teats and doing the milking or hooking the machine up in today's world to where the robot does that, and so they're observing. But the other component of it is the volume of data that robot provides you and how difficult or easy it is to go through it and sort out what is this actually telling me from a production standpoint, so I can make some decisions to optimize, my return of that robot or the return of my dairy. And this is where like an AI function analyzing the data, and probably some of the companies are doing this, but this is an example of application of it where that AI is assisting in breaking that data down and giving me the 5 points instead of like having to go through and try to figure out what the spreadsheet's telling me.
So I think the biggest challenge with data universally, just take industry out of it for a second, and you touched on this, is the ability to interpret what it means and not have a bias. More often than not, especially if you're getting reports from, let's say, business partners, the information is usually biased to buying a product or purchasing something. What it's going to allow you to do is establish outcomes. I'm trying to solve for this. I'm trying to let's stick with the dairy example. I'm trying to maximize output, or I'm trying to output quality. Here's the numbers that I need to be in this range or observe. Help me understand the data leading up to this that impacts that, and then help me develop a path for improving it. The biggest change in AI over the last 6 months has been the ability to explain it in simple terms. So it can find the data sets, interpret the data, and then verbalize, hey, here's the solution and here's the recommendation. So it is doing the work of what a true data scientist would be able to do and give you a direction or inform an opinion that's unbiased to somebody else.
One of the things when I think about AI implementation in a business, farming or otherwise, is I think sometimes people jump to the replacing all the people versus the productivity gain of the people that are currently there. It is talk about the balance of that, and like when you look at it, you work with a lot of different businesses in this AI space. how should we be looking at it? Is it a cost-cutting measure or is it a productivity gain?
I think it's both, but let me clarify. AI alone will not replace somebody. It's the person or people who use AI that will replace them, or the businesses that harness the information of AI will outpace or outscale the other people. And what I mean by that is if you can leverage the insights, it's a flight to quality. I can optimize something, I can do better. But if you're not going to free up that time and move to quality, move to optimization, it's kind of a wasted gain. And you can't necessarily just, yes, could you probably save a couple jobs here and there? Absolutely. But the biggest benefit is going to be upscaling the knowledge of the workforce and teaching them, here's how to use this tool to do your job better so we can move forward as a company. Those are the changes that we're going to see. And I believe that's going to be the leaps. And to your earlier question, that's where that mid-cap company is all of a sudden going to make a leap because they can accomplish with 10 people what used to take 100. And the ones that harness those things or those opportunities are the ones that are going to leapfrog people in the industry.
You want to use a parallel example? Like when we were one of the big farm shows is Agritechnica. It happens every 2 years in Germany, and there's always like a theme from that companies are trying to push. Like it was electric motors. We've had environmental lowering emissions. It's autonomy, robotics. When we have conversations, and there obviously is artificial intelligence when we talk about autonomy and robotics, but a lot of times people jump to how this benefits the largest farm, and the scalability thing. But I've often thought that if you're a lone ranger, if you're a one-man band and you're farming, you're doing 3,000 acres in the middle of Saskatchewan and you somehow are making it happen by yourself, this is where this kind of technology really allows you to leap forward. I think in some ways I could argue that it actually benefits some of the smallest companies the most because they're the most under-resourced in some of these areas.
I agree 100%. I will tell you, the smaller the company and the better, they can change faster. And we do a lot of work with large companies across multiple industries. And the speed at which it takes them to adopt this technology, because it changes them fundamentally. Like integrating AI will completely change how companies do business. And I'm an optimist, but I'm also a big believer. Like I believe what's happening with AI is somewhat of a second industrial revolution. Like I believe this is as big as when we invented the production lines because it's going to change how roles function within companies. And there's no better than somebody who's doing 10 jobs. This is now going to facilitate or free up their ability to focus on the ones that are most important. And it's going to take it off their plate. But I think it's going to take a little while for people to understand, hey, as a small business owner, like I have to learn a new skill and implement this, but it is a game changer. I have seen even some of the conversations we had yesterday, freeing just what it frees up and allows you to focus on in a business are the high value tasks.
Yep.
It gets rid of the immediate things that just pile up and take and consume time and energy.
We're going to get back to our conversation here on the Mind Your Farm Business podcast, talking about AI with Doug Foley. But first, a word from our sponsor, RBC Royal Bank.
This episode of Mind Your Farm Business podcast is brought to you by RBC. Maybe you've had an idea about upgrading your operation, or finally getting that renovation done, or buying some new equipment. Or you want to be a little less reliant on the weather from season to season. Get some help making it happen by speaking with an RBC Agriculture account manager. Then, set up an investment plan to make even more of your ideas happen. Visit rbc.com/chartyourcourse and get started today.
If you applied the Doug cynical filter, thinking about AI, what would come to mind? What are you is there anything you're cynical about?
The biggest cynicism, it has everything to do with warfare. It is such a powerful tool. Like you put this in the wrong hands. We've already seen it if you look at fraud. So like robocalls, like people, because it can copy voices, video, like you want to talk about deep fake. There have been multiple cases of fraud where they clone a voice of a child and they're calling their parents or basically ransom money when the kid's literally across the street, completely safe. So my biggest cynicism is going to be more the geopolitical, like used as warfare. Um, than anything else because we're seeing it. We're seeing high increases in fraud. Just
Politics,
robodos.
politics too.
Big time, yeah. You're gonna see deep fake. So there's a tool, and it's not intended to scare people, but if you go, there's a tool called HeyGen. I could record this, or I could even just take a clip from this. Like, let's say we take a 15-second clip from this, and it's gonna match my mannerisms, my tone, my intonation, and I can essentially just keep writing scripts and automate the production of videos, and it's gonna look pretty darn close to this, and that just keeps getting better and better. So it's a little scary that we're coming into an election year in the US and this technology's here. So I hope it's not used for bad, but there's a lot more good that it can do. And I do see that's why I think Elon Musk's, fighting so hard to keep it out of anyone's hands because this thing is way too powerful for, 3 or 4 entities to own.
Yeah, no, it's those are all good points. I've actually said to clients we were recording videos, right? I've said, I've said it kind of jokingly, but it's like, you use it on your social media and all this kind of stuff, but please don't alter what I've said because it's
Yeah.
way easier than it used to be. Please don't.
It's scary. I mean, we could turn you to either party in a matter of like 10 minutes. It just depends.
Yeah, yeah. So, okay. Member of, you're listening to this, you're ranching in Idaho or you're, a corn and bean farmer in Ontario. I've heard a lot about this. You've intrigued me, Doug. I'm interested. Now what? What do I, where do I start? What do I do? What are some of the practical components of this for people to, because getting started sometimes is the hardest part, right? So what do we need to do?
The one thing I will tell you, start playing with it. This is a skill you must learn. Like it's going to be here to stay. It's not going away. This is not a fad like Snapchat. Like this one's sticking around. My favorite way for everybody to start is go download the OpenAI Chat GPT app and just start playing with it. And the cool thing and why I'm biased towards that app, OpenAI is kind of the foundational structure for most AIs. They plug into that platform. But their user face on that app is really simple. It's as easy as grab your phone, hit the mic button, and say, hey, can you help me come up with a sales script for my sales team? And all of a sudden, it just produces a sales script that's really accurate. And what happens is now that the barrier to entry is like, oh, it's not this intimidating thing to use. It's not this huge tech implementation. It's just part of an app. They can start to play with it and start to see, oh, you know what? I could use it for this communication potentially. And then as you get more comfortable, you can start to, okay, I'm going to have it look at a data set. I'm going to put it in and I'm going to ask. But the simplest and fastest way to think about implementing AI in the business, think of it as members of your team. Think, hey, what are specific roles or specific tasks that are really monotonous and I don't want to do? And then that same app, just open up and say, hey, can you help me with this? And try to ask specific questions, just like you're talking to a member of your team. Because remember, it's a learning model and it has intelligence and it's designed and it has enough context that it's probably been presented with the problem you're asking by thousands of other people. So just do some reps and sets and play with it and just reduce the intimidation factor because if you can just talk to it and ask some simple questions, and honestly, you can even just use it for fun. And I'll give you an example. I coach basketball, I coach baseball for my kids, and one of the parents was really frustrated because I didn't have a practice plan. I was like, well, I don't have time to really do this. I'm like, so I asked it, hey, I'm coaching 8-year-old basketball. I've got 6 weeks left in the season. I need to come up with a practice plan. Can you give me a number of drills? We have 45 minutes to practice. And all of a sudden it just outputted like 6-week program practice plans. And I said, hey, can you help me out? Can you help me with the emails to the parents? And it wrote some pretty funny emails like, hey, here's the practice plan. So we were done, but it can be that simple. It can be that fun. I would get it, play with it and just see what it can create. It's pretty powerful. And the fun thing for us, like I have a team, that's all they do is basically play with AI all day. Our goal is to break it. So they're constantly looking at ways or looking at Reddit and seeing, what people are doing. But
Yeah.
it is a skill set in business you're going to have to acquire. It's here to stay.
And so I have played with it a lot. Okay. And I've used it for some of those same functions that you have, which is really funny. It could be you're trying to build, your business plan. Here's what some of our goals, it can assist you in, like, I really appreciate it from the standpoint of getting started. I talk for a living. My writing is a whole different story. I can experience writer's block, and I need that ability to just kind of get started sometimes. So I use it as that kind of a crutch or that kind of a helper. I think the important thing that I learned early is that it's not perfect. And I think a lot of people try it, see the output. Well, that's not correct. That sucks. And they don't challenge it. And you said this earlier. You do need to treat it like a person. Hey, that's not correct. What I meant was this, right? That's the kind of stuff you need to be prepared to do, to play with it and just kind of be curious. And, sometimes that's why I think it's important sometimes to start with some fun stuff as opposed to work stuff, because work, you're like, oh, I might as well just do it myself. Fun stuff, you're willing to play around. But you need to challenge it too. I think that's think about it as you're the manager reviewing somebody's work, be like, oh no, you need to go back to the drawing board. And I sometimes even use, like, we need to start over here. This is totally wrong. That's an important play side of the scenario too. I think challenging it
100%. We treat it like when we start with them. Now we built some pretty advanced ones for clients, but we treat it as if it's starting at an intern. It needs very clear, very explicit instructions and very clear explanations of what the output is.
Yep.
If you just say, hey, write me a blog post about cattle, I'm going to get the most bland, weird blog post.
Yep.
Now, if you were to ask it a very specific thing, like what is the best type of food to get the highest, most nutritious output through a dairy farm, now I'm going to start to get better content. But even for people like you, if you hate typing and you hate typing on an iPhone or hate typing on a computer and you prefer speaking, try using the microphone function to just talk to it and literally say, hey, I need to produce a blog post about this. Here's the sources I typically look at. Here's the type of article I'm trying to write. Here's the length I want. Help give me a bullet point idea. And then when it gives you the bullet points, it said, hey, these are online. Now let's turn it into a finished piece. Right. Like, work through it. And it's the reason it's called Chat GPT is meant to be talked to. Like, it's meant to be a conversation. It's not one in, one out.
Well, or like put it in another context, like finances, right? So here's where we're at. Here's what I'm trying to accomplish. I am having a meeting with the accountant. What are the 5 questions I need to have for them to achieve this, or to prevent this, or to make myself sound kind of smart, whatever that is, as to get yourself started, right? And like, listen, everything that comes out of that, those 5 questions, probably a few you're throwing out, but that's okay. You use it in that kind of manner. That I think that's a good business. There's a lot of good business applications for it in that way.
It's honestly, like you're saying, just start using it and do the reps and sets. Like, oh, I wonder if I could ask that. Think of it almost as a search bar, but for more practical applications. Like you're saying, like, oh, help me come in. It's funny. There's so many people who are using it for dating apps. Like, hey, help me write a bio for this profile.
Yeah.
Like, I've seen so many ironic creative uses, but as a business owner, entrepreneur, like, just play with it, get used to some of the applications. A lot of times we'll use it for, hey, we got a customer complaint. Can you help me write an email?
Yeah.
And it's really effective at writing in a tone, because you can say, hey, like, be professional, but apologetic. So I think those reps and sets are a huge, easy way to start. And then as you get more advanced, just reach out to people that can help you put in the right components.
So, Doug, before we wrap up here, what does this look like in 5 years?
So we talk about this a lot, and I've seen this when we've had multiple technological booms. You're going to see a lot of consolidation in the space. So your big players, it's already happening. So if you look at Adobe, for example, Adobe has fully integrated into everything from video to image creation. Like, you can expand an image, lengthen it, do editing all with AI. So I think your major players in tech are going to consolidate down, but it's going to be integrated universally across everything we have. It's going to be in our phones. It's going to be part of any work functions we do. And I think the biggest change of that integration is going to be how we do work. And if we take a step back and just look through history, it's just repeating itself. We had the production line, right? And on the production line, when Henry Ford was building cars, we had a bunch of workers lined up. And each worker had a specific responsibility, whether that was picking up the tire and then move down, the person would bolt the tire, the next person dropped the engine in, and then they would fasten the engine. The workflow automation space is where we're going to see some of the biggest leaps. And integrating AI into different workflow automation, whether that's analyzing accounting or doing bookkeeping, whether that's content creation or automating processes and data, like you mentioned, there are a number of companies in the ag industry that are leveraging AI to provide insights and adjust things. Like John Deere's tractor is filled with AI.
Yeah.
Like the connection between the tractor, the sprayers, when they're harvesting, like how they adjust for different points of SARD and seed depth, like AI is already here. We're using it in ag. But I think its integration and workflow process and our everyday life is going to be some of the biggest advancements we're going to see. And some, you may not even see it. It might just be behind the scenes and things are just moving through faster.
Yeah. Hey, Doug, this has been awesome. I appreciate the insight and look deeper into artificial intelligence, the application in agriculture. We'll definitely, this is a fast evolving environment, so I'm sure we will have this conversation and get a bit of an update in the future. So thanks a lot.
Thanks so much for having me, Sean. We'll see you soon.
And that's a wrap on this episode of the Mind Your Farm Business podcast, brought to you by RBC Royal Bank. A big thank you to Doug Foley for sharing his deep insights into the world of artificial intelligence and its applications in agriculture and in business. You know, as we've learned today, AI has the potential to really level the playing field for farms of all shapes and sizes, offering tools that can streamline operations and provide valuable data insights. It's clear that AI will fundamentally change how we operate, allowing us to focus on high-value tasks and optimize our processes inside of our businesses. If you found today's discussion interesting, enlightening, you learned something, please subscribe to our podcast, share it with other farm business owners that you know that would really, really appreciate this kind of information. If there's anything that Doug said that sparks some interest, or maybe further questions, some comments, some opinion, you can send me an email, shaney@realagriculture.com. You can also call the Real Ag Feedback line at 855-776-6147. Hey, thanks for tuning in to this episode. And until next time, keep on minding your farm business.